Hi, everyone. My name is Eric Hewson, and I am the founder of an organization called the hashtag Same Here Global Mental Health Movement. And I'm going to take you through an instructional video on how to make use of the Same Here scale. So, what's the most common question that we ask each other every single day in every single language? And it certainly happens in school. It's, hey, how are you? And the most common answer that we get is, I'm all right, I'm okay, I'm fine. It's basically a brick wall. We don't really get a response. We don't have any indication of how someone is truly doing. My parents were both educators their entire careers, and I saw this all the time when I was in schools and their frustrations with getting students to open up and to know how they were actually feeling, to also know where some of their behaviors came from. And so, why is it so hard for students to open up? Well, here are some of the reasons when we've done our research. Blank stares that we get from them. They freeze up because they feel like they're on the spot. Feelings are hard for them to share because there's so many of them. They don't even know where to begin. What are they allowed to say? What will their parents be okay with them saying? Are they going to get labeled if they open up and they share something that's, a little bit personal? Are they the sick or the bad kid if they open up? How are they really doing relative to everyone else? Are they messed up because they feel like that in their head relative to other people? There's so much swirling around an individual's head when they're asked that question of, how are you doing? So unfortunately, because we don't have deeper answers, when it comes to this topic of mental health, social emotional learning, there's such a movement towards placing students into buckets, disorder buckets, depression, anxiety, PTSD. We don't love that as an organization. We don't think diagnostics is the way to go. There's certainly places that one could go out to get a diagnosis, but when it comes to school, trying to veer away from that. Also trying to veer away from making mental health a binary topic, one where you either have the kids who are bad, misbehaved, sick, damaged, unhealthy, what you see on the left side, or you have the good, well-behaved, sharp, perfect kids. We often see this in the way that they're acting in class. They either seem cool, calm, and collected, or unfortunately, they're riled up. And so we put them in one of two categories. And so the goal is to try to get away from labels, try to get away from this binary way of looking at mental health and social emotional learning. So with Same Here, we say that it's a tribe that everyone in the world is already a member of. They just don't all know it yet, meaning that all of us live on this mental health continuum where, here's the formula, events that happen in our lives and the thoughts that then come from those events create these feelings that we have. And then the feelings that we have create the behaviors. And unfortunately, we oftentimes judge kids based on their behaviors, but we don't think about what are the events and the things that are going on in their lives. What are those things making them think of? As someone who had a brother who had cancer twice and went through all the chemo treatments and everything that went along with that and many other ailments that he went through, I know that my behaviors in school were very much related to what I was going through at home. So we need some kind of common language to be able to gauge how a student's doing. And when it comes to our temperature, we have a thermometer. We're able to see how our temperature is relative to, quote, normal 98.6. And then when it comes to our weight, even though some of us, like myself, don't love doing it, we can step on a scale. Even if we want to keep it to ourselves, we can see how do we weigh relative to how we weighed before or how other people weigh in our height category. And the doctor's able to tell us how we're doing. We don't have that with mental health. So some of the tools that have been used in the past to try and make up for this, you see a number scale. The first problem with the number scale is you got the met, okay, fine answer, which is fine. But it's also, because it's numerics, the kid who feels like they're always at a 0, they feel like they're being judged and there's something wrong with them because they're a 0 out of 10. And the kid who's at a 10 out of 10 is great and happy and fine and healthy. And again, it goes back to that binary way of looking at things. Then you've got these beauties, which are ways to look at, again, disorder, not exactly how we want to look at social emotional health and how a student is just quite feeling. This gives too much of a diagnostic. Then you see these charts where there's so many feelings and emotions, it becomes overwhelming for kids. What's the difference between feeling guilty versus ashamed versus calm versus worried? There's so many to think about. There's no linearity to it. There's no way to say, I'm going from this to feeling that. That's a better feeling or that's a worse feeling. I'd like to feel this way instead. And then you see, zones and meters like this. And the same exact concept here is, what does movement on here mean? Where's the linearity of it? If you're in the blue and you're glum, but then you move to mopey, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Is that a positive mood or a negative mood? Is blessed better than pleasant? Green to yellow? Which makes which better? And we don't know. We can't gauge with tools like this. So I know a lot of schools have resorted to teachers having to individually sit with students and take notes on Google Docs, which is very labor intensive, but it also lacks consistency because you might be asking a student how they're feeling. You get an answer from a student, but are they truly answering how they feel? And is your interpretation a little bit different than what the student's actually saying? And that comes in later when we talk about meeting with parents and teachers together. So we got together with our board. This is just a small piece of it. Integrative psychologists, psychiatrists, nurse psych practitioners, psychotherapists, that we brought together students and teachers and school professionals. We wanted to create a tool that would help everyone look at mental health in a similar way with similar language. Gentleman on the right is my partner with the Same Here Schools program, one of our main areas of focus. And I'm on the left, and you can see that we are a mishmash of lived experiences plus we have professionals. And with those professionals and lived experiences, we also have athletes and people with platforms, because we want this to be tools that can be used by everyone. Hopefully what you're seeing, the theme here is this is a smorgasbord, a tapestry of many people with many different backgrounds, with many different inputs. And so what we did was we created a Same Here scale. Okay, 6 placements. I'm going to go into more detail on this, but the main takeaway on this is it's a continuum of feelings instead of good or bad, or instead of being placed in a diagnostic category. It happens for 5 and 5 of us. We all move up and down on this scale. And it happens because our neurobiology changes from the events and the thoughts that we have over time. So let's dive a little bit deeper. Why do we not want to be fine with fine? Because feelings and emotions, what they do is they're indications, they're directionals for us. So if you notice, the first thing on the scale is there's no middle point. There's 6 places. So you either are surviving on slightly more positive side of doing fine, met, and okay, or fluctuating slightly more on the downside of doing fine, met, or okay. Next thing I want to show you is, again, that this is a continuum. It blends across, which means it's permission giving. You can move anywhere up and down on that at any given point. You'll see, again, this is based on neurobiology. So we don't go from extremely happy on one end to extremely sad on the other end. That's not how our neurobiology works. Struggling, which you see next to sinking, we become overwhelmed, we become hypervigilant, we may be sweating more, we may be scared. And then sinking is when our system becomes so overwhelmed, it starts to shut down. And you've seen that where you have no affect whatsoever. And students, it looks like almost they're completely out of it and they can't take on any more possibly. So we actually follow the way in which the neurobiology changes over time. And then you see the ING words to describe each of the feelings and emotion states that they're in: thriving, gliding, surviving, fluctuating, struggling, sinking. The idea is the ING, they're moving up and down in those states throughout any given day, week, month, year. So what we did was we took that Same Here scale and then we put it into an app that connects teachers and students. It also connects school professionals and parents, should that be an option that your school wants to go with. So for the teachers, pretty easy login. We do all the back end work with your IT folks. You go in, you find your school. Once we've put all your school information in, you find that school and you put in your telephone number. Your telephone number has been put in the system on our back end, and it creates what's called an OTP, a one-time passcode for you. Once you log in, you never have to log in again. Then what happens is, once you go in, your entire class is loaded in there, and you can see all the students listed in this mock class that's here. And when you go into that class on any given day, you could click all. And when you click all, it highlights every single student in your class, and you're able to send them a request for how are they feeling on the scale. Now, the students, they log in. And when they log in, they get a username and password, again, that we create in the back end. We work with your IT department, and they give out the passwords to you to give to your students. And you see the request comes from you when you select that all to get all the students to, ask how they're feeling. And it comes to the students like this, where it's either a touch screen if they're using their personal device, or if it's a Chromebook, it may be a touch screen Chromebook, or it may be one that you use the mouse. But they select where they're at on the chart. And then the most important question, right? We want to tie how they're feeling back to something that may have been going on in their life. So in this case, the question is always, What's something that may be happening in your life that's been making you feel this way, right? We want to tie it back to what are the things going on in their life? Not that they're a messed up person, not that there's something wrong with them, but let's start to open about what the things are in their life. Now, that's optional. That's not something that they have to answer, but it's an encouraging way to get them to answer over time, to feel comfortable with you, that they can share, so that we can find out more and more about them. Now, the beautiful thing is, as the students share, you'll see that they are able to look at an aggregate chart of the answers that are coming in real time. So talk about being permission giving. Now you know you're not the only one who's not thriving in the class. Now you know you're able to feel however you want to feel on any given day. In the teachers, you get that same aggregate chart that comes in daily and refreshes each day as the students come in and put the answers in. But you also get the individual answers from the actual students themselves. The one on the left, the students don't get to see each other's answers. And so when you get a student's answer, what you see on the left here, what comes into you. So let's say this student said they were fluctuating. You're also going to see the last 5 responses that they gave, and that's at the bottom of the screen. And then you're going to be able to give some kind of behavioral feedback that you're noticing. And that comes in 2 different forms. One is you could select one of the radio buttons to select some kind of already pre-populated feeling that or behavior that you're noticing in them. The other is you could actually write in a behavior. So you write that behavior in, you click save, and it saves it to that student's chart of their feelings over time. So if you see, I wrote, John's been very active in class 3 days now. That comes in the bottom under engaging with a lot of classmates, that also he's been very active in class for 3 days. Now, at the top of your screen also, you'll notice the icon that you can go to the chart, which is what's all the way on the right over there. So you always have the option to go and look at the chart, or what's next to it is you can always chat with that student. So the chart is this, right? Was sharing with the chart with you before, and you're starting to see trends with the student over time. Okay. And you're able to see what answers are being given over what amount of time, and what are we going to do with those over time. You're also, as I was saying before, you're able to chat with those students back and forth if you want. That's totally up to you in terms of what you want to create in your classroom. Do you only chat at certain points? Are you making it just that they're answering the feelings and that you're not going to engage in a chat, but if they do want to talk, your door is open for them to come and talk to you? Different teachers do it different ways. Now, I get a lot of questions from teachers. What do I do if a student's in a crisis situation and I'm not around? What do I do if I want to tell a student that I'm not always going to be there to answer their question? It's after school hours. There's no one else around. The nice thing is, in the settings portion on the student app, there is a button that's called Lifesaver. If you see that, I just circled right there. And that opens up our Lifesaver suicide prevention tool, which gives them 4 steps, almost like a stop, drop, and roll. There's also a video they can watch, but in the case of an emergency, they can actually click on that L on their phone. And what opens up is the ability to call the suicide prevention hotline, which takes you to the local line there, or text directly to the crisis text line. So the nice thing is, I know with teachers, you always want to make sure you're keeping an eye on your students. But you also want to know, if I'm not around, or if it's after hours, if I want to tell them I'm not going to be answering or taking a look at any of these, I want to just make sure that someone has a place to go. This is where they can go in a crisis situation. And so why did we create the scale in the aggregate and the macro and the global perspective? Is because we wanted teachers, students, parents, school professionals to all be able to look at the same data. If we're just observing students, that's only one set of data. But if a student is actually sharing with us how they're feeling on a daily basis, and the teacher is able to look at that on a daily basis, the school professional has access to look at that whenever they want. The parents are able to come in and look at what the students have answered. Now we're all looking at the same data that's coming from the student. There's no room for misinterpretation because it's all coming from the same source. Now, also along with this, you guys are going to get a guide. So that guide is going to show you, again, the scale at the top. And so where students pick certain places on the scale, that's fine. You've already seen this already. But now it's also going to share within each one of those placements on the scale, what are some thoughts that someone might have? So here under surviving, you're saying, I'm getting by, things are a little up and down. I'd like to feel better, but I'm not miserable, right? Compare that to, let's say, the one that's just to the left of it, the gliding. I'm very much enjoying myself. I've experienced small bumps in the road. Overall, though, I'm really good. The other thing is you want to notice behaviors. So you'll be able to see within students, okay, are they angry, irritated, crying, restless outbursts? Okay, maybe they're actually in a struggling place. Now we're looking at this on our end as teachers and as school professionals. We're saying these are what we might notice in each one of these states. It'll be interesting to compare that to what the students are actually answering. Doesn't mean you need to put this information in the actual the app itself. It just is a nice guide for you to be able to say, what are the thoughts the student might be having in these places? And what are the behaviors that we might be noticing with them? Okay, so short term, long term, also guides. Short term, there is no problem with being anywhere on that scale. You can be all the way in thriving. You could be all the way even in sinking. We all go through different challenges in life. If you lose a loved one, if you get broken up with, if you did terrible on a test, oftentimes we're sinking. The challenge is in the long term, seeing us where we are fluctuating or to the right on that scale for too long, starting to go into, obviously every person's different, but 1.5 weeks, 2 weeks place where we're continuously seeing that child or that student staying in that place over time. What happens is over the long term, if we stay to the left, we're staying in what's called psychological flexibility. There's this balance between what's called the parasympathetic and the sympathetic response. So the parasympathetic, think P for pro, it's rest and digest. We're feeling all right. We're feeling good. Sympathetic, I need to be at attention. I got a big test coming up. Something might be happening. I got to be ready for it, right? So that's good to have flexibility to be able to go back and forth between those two things so that we can be, vigilant in the sympathetic response when we need to. But sometimes when we stay too long in the right and we're in there, we're dipping in there too many times over a stretch of a long period of time, we might get locked in that sympathetic response. And we were having ruminating thoughts and we're fearful of things might happening. We're afraid that the next shoe might drop. That's really what we're looking out for. And so when we see those trends, I mean, you as teachers, you're really just taking the emotional pulse, the emotional thermometer of the students. When you really want to hand it off to the school professionals, when you're seeing responses that are starting to pile up towards that right of the scale for a week, week and a half, 2 weeks and beyond, that's when we start to want to send it over to the school professional. And how do we do that? Well, here's the nice thing, easy tools. So you go into an answer that a student just gave, you hit the 3 buttons at the top and you hit forward the responses. And you can forward, in this case, Jane's responses for, could be, as you see in the top right, all of them, or it could be just for some recent ones. And those answers get sent directly to your school professional that you're lined up with. And your school decides which teacher gets lined up with which school professional. So all in all, the nice thing is, this is an app that connects students and teachers and school professionals. You've got the option to be able to put parents in there if you'd like. There is an individual Same Here Scale app, if you want to look that up, so that parents could start to practice this with their children at home. The name of these two apps was Same Here Teacher and Same Here Student. This one just Same Here Scale. So we're having common language across the entire school community, across your family, across all the students, across all the school professionals, across all the teachers, similar to that common language that we have with the thermometer when it comes to our temperature, to the scale when it comes to our weight. And you start to see it, and it becomes part of the fabric and the culture of a school. And you start asking someone how they're feeling, and instead of them looking with you blank stare, oh, you know what? I've been gliding lately, or I've been fluctuating lately. And you're able to ask deeper questions beyond that because someone is giving an indication of how they're feeling. Everything is COPPA, FERPA, HIPAA compliant. So no worries on any data being used or shared or mined or anything like that. We don't do that as an organization. And I just wanted to end with this, that you can email us with any questions at any time. And my staff is pretty much glued to the phone. So it's schools@samehereglobal.org, schools@samehereglobal.org. And I look forward to working with you all on this. I think you'll enjoy using it. I think that it'll help you gain some clarity in terms of why your students are feeling how they're feeling. It'll help you keep your finger on the pulse of how they're doing. It'll help them feel like you're checking in with them and you care about how they're doing. And overall, I think it's going to help with behavior. That's what we've seen the trends be, is that when students are starting to look at why they're feeling how they're feeling, they're able to then get in front of that with you and they're able to more be in control of their behavior because they know that it's coming from a place of things that are going on in their lives. Thanks so much. Look forward to seeing how you use it and can't wait to see all the data.